Commotion kind of bites in and it keeps its grip. It's like a dog on a tire, you know. And it's like people know that we have this kind of stay with it attitude. You know, it's an adaptability too. Like to me, a lot of things could happen to Commotion, but it would still keep going. I mean, theoretically, even if the space, you know, disappeared or were like taken away from us, or the lease or whatever, or the police or whatever, I mean, to me, we could deal with any of those things. It would start happening again. It would start somewhere else.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that there is an ongoing, you know, struggle between these different forces, you know, the forces that are in some ways denying us what we feel is rightfully ours, or that we have worked for and sacrificed for, and at the same time, it's precisely because we're struggling against them that we resort to the means that we thrive on. We resort to the means of cooperative effort. We resort to the means of sharing. We resort to the means of supporting one another emotionally, financially, any kind of way you can imagine, and that's beautiful. You know, I mean, that inspires me too. So what, you know, it's kind of like, you know, you can't have one without the other. It's a dynamic. It's the whole thing, you know. And I mean, it's kind of hard to deal with, because in the past, you know, it was just a simple us and them for me. You know, I mean, the haves and the have-nots. They're up there. They're the enemy. I'm fighting them. Okay, I still feel that way. I mean, I feel that way every time I walk down the street, and you see the suffering and the humiliation that everybody experiences where I live, where this place is, where we are standing today. And you realize that there are people, there are other people, other human beings that are actually responsible for this and are conscious of the fact that they're, you know, dropping all this misery on people. But at the same time, I'm saying, hey, I am not going to let that turn me into an animal. You know, I'm not going to let that turn me into somebody who's given up on life.
I think people are really, you know, the public in general is really, you know, yearning for that kind of thing right now. I think people are pretty fed up with, you know, mass media culture, which is what you're basically offered, you know, on MTV and at most of the main clubs and recordings, and that people seek an alternative, and these places provide that. That's one of the reasons that people, when they first come to Commotion, they tend to get really excited about the place. It's like, you know, wow, people do this, people do something that, you know, doesn't have anything to do with money as its goal. That's still a pretty, you know, radical concept in America.
I guess a big impetus was that not only did we want to practice what we preach, you know, our altruistic motives and all that stuff, but it was a very practical thing, that we realized that the way the industry operates is to, you know, squeeze the juice out of the fruit and throw it away, you know, and we weren't going to allow ourselves to be put in the position of depending on people that we knew could not be depended on. Whatever you want to call them, you know, vultures, snakes, parasites, the enemy, I don't care, you know, businessmen, there's a million names for these people and what they do, but we had a very strong sense that they couldn't be trusted, and therefore we wanted to use our relationship with them to further our interests.
Commotion's a lot less of a underground party space than it is an artistic, collective, basically a space where people can do all sorts of different arts. It's not, you know, limited just to punk bands or this or that. We have all different kinds of music here. We've been able to put on, you know, many benefits. We've raised thousands of dollars for a lot of different organizations, everything from AIDS support groups to Food Not Bombs to environmental groups. And we have an art gallery, which is something you can't really have in a space that's too underground and too wild, you know, a little bit. But we found that, you know, we really want to be able to do kind of a multiplicity of things.
We're interested in doing real things and not just sitting around complaining about the way things are, you know. And so in order to do that, you have to gather the resources that you have and use what you got to get what you need.
One of the early issues with Commotion was the fact that that a party can be a lot more than just like your classic kind of definition of a party. Partying is one of the primary kind of activities, along with the other things that one does or is supposed to do. You work, you pay taxes, you know, you watch beer and car commercials, and you party. Party is like the verb for, like, you know, the leisure of this generation. But I found that starting at Grove Street, where the looters originally practiced and had parties, and extending into Commotion, and before that the Offensive, which Thierry started, the French anarchist, now architect, that the parties that started happening had a lot more going on than just a bunch of people getting drunk. People brought a lot of stuff to the parties. People would talk. People would exchange information and phone numbers about bands, about projects. I mean, there was a lot of exchange, and there was like you had a sense of community and growth and communication coming out of people partying.
You know, it's interesting how you know, people talk about the arts being censored in places like, you know, the Eastern Bloc countries. They have suppression of the arts and censorship of the arts on kind of a from the government down. But in the United States, I think that it's a lot more economic. You know, in a sense, you know, they say, go ahead, do whatever you want. You know, you have the freedom to do whatever you want. The only problem is without money, without any of the means to do that stuff, it's very difficult. Basically, the control of the funds, the resources, the money to be able to really make a film or, you know, make an album, which costs who knows how much money to do a good job, maybe costs $100,000. You know, obviously the average person doesn't have that much money.
I have survived from my music before, but it puts a lot of compromises in the way. The more you rely on earning your living from music, the more compromises you find yourself considering or making so that you don't have to go get a day job. So I feel like my music can keep its integrity a little bit better if I don't look at it like this is something I have to rely on my income for.
I feel everybody at times, including myself, feels powerless in terms of being able to change the huge structures of the world in the way that everything is moving. These giant movements that are happening, these giant, the control that big corporations have, the structure of things, the way these social structures and these economic, political structures are trying to deal with the masses of people and machines.
Turning on a key. dance to me.
I think it's very important to support underground economy, alternative funds, underground money, anything that's outside of the system of banks, insurance companies, politicians' wallets, just staying outside of the system. So I applaud any endeavor that stands up against that, doesn't care about licenses, doesn't care about insurance, doesn't care about legality. Commotion fits into that category for me. People from all over the world admire what happens at Commotion because it's an example of a collective that somehow manages to operate with a pretty loose organization, and just through like-minded people who are cooperatively minded and have a similar vision. We don't all play the same kind of music by any means, but we're all inspired by the cross-pollination of music from all around the world.
The world is dominated by a money-making, a monetary situation, and so you have to look to see the things that are real in this world. That's the point about Stephen Biko or Mandela or any of the Native American people who have come through, is that when things aren't right, you can't just sit there and pretend they're not. You can't deny it. And maybe you can't maybe you can't change the world, but the one thing you can do as an individual is say out loud to the world, to yourself, to anyone, just say, I see this. To forcibly remove them, to gut the earth on which they live, the home of the heart, to take the little they have, to upset the balance, is to kill them, is to kill her. Strip mining means nothing. Sacrifice area to greed, not to need. The donations made to worthy tax-deductible causes will not absolve you, will not absolve you of your great emptiness, the sense of inadequacy you try so desperately to bury, the crimes you commit denying the name of it, will not absolve you. You see, the death, after all, is your own. 2 cars in the garage of a 3-story home in Upper Manchester, the VCR casually left on all night, its 40-inch screen ablaze, 15 pairs of quality Italian leather shoes, the matching apparel, diamonds in a safety deposit box downtown, continental cuisine, trips to Rio, tickets to the opera, opening night minks and sequins, skydiving and scuba lessons, catered cocktail parties, wall-to-wall mirrors and oriental rugs, crystal chandeliers, silver servingware, the insulated safety of especially patrolled exclusive neighborhoods, the maid, the gardener, the cook. All the cliché accoutrements of success, excess, comfort, and convenience. The energy and resources spent, the imbalance of pain for pleasure.
Getting back to Commotion, I feel that it's important to be part of something that's an experiment, that you can see from how it's gone in the past that it can have a really strong effect, and that it's only limited by kind of your own mindset. And it's hard to gauge the effect on a short term, but I have seen an effect of Commotion on a long term, because I've seen how excited people get at coming to different benefits for groups and seeing that these people are actually there and that they're out there, that people that care.
Everybody's skeptical. A performer that comes here for the first time, or even an audience that comes here for the first time, might say, hey man, too good to believe. You know, it's too good to be true. I've heard this shit before. It can't be happening. After a few times or a couple of experiences at the place, people go away saying, hey, it's real. Nobody told me this. It happened. It has really happened. It's great. You know, it makes me feel good. And that's the reward. You know, that's the payoff.
I feel like some people get compartmentalized so easy. They come home from work and they watch TV. If they go down to Commotion and they see that there's people, that there's a whole movement connected around something, they start feeling that there's not just the corporations and a bunch of disorganized individuals.
Somebody once said, I am a whirlwind. I am a disturbance in a turbulent nature. And that's what commotion is. You know, I can't define commotion. And I don't want to try to define commotion. I mean, the word is defined by Webster, you know, in the dictionary. That's probably as good a definition as anybody, and he did it, you know, 150 years ago. I think it's a volatile combination of, you know, real things, and that is about as close as I can get to it.